Hello, 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 everybody. Please come on in. Come on in. We are about to start this show. My co host might not be able to make it tonight because he is very busy in the campaign trail, but we'll message him and find out. And also, I started really late. Um, all right. So, hang in there, brothers and sisters. We are about to start the show in less than a minute as our co-hosts come on to the backstage now. I forgot to press enter when I was sending him the link. That was my fault. But folks, there's a lot of things that we will be talking about tonight. It is a very important night, as you know. Um, we had a we had an independent contender last night, and tomorrow we have another independent from Brampton Center. So hang in there, folks. So we are going to start now. I'm going to be quiet. Stand by as we start the show.
Welcome, everybody. Today is Wednesday, September the 8th. I'm your host, Richard Rupp, with my co-host, the Ordinary Joe, Joey Salvador. Today, during the election campaign, we are doing audience participation episode. You're watching Power Joe Politics, only here on OJTV, The Ordinary Joe Show.
You're the original Ordinary Joe, but I'm an Ordinary Joe too.
My name is Sean Torrey. I'm the mayor of Toronto, and you are watching the Ordinary Joe Show. And this is Ordinary Joe right here. He's right here.
Well, I guess I'm just going to start with the show. Joe, are you there?
Oh, sorry. I was doing the. It's just another ordinary Joe show. You didn't hear me because my mic is mute, and my camera is not working today for some reason. But hello, Richard. How are you doing? Sorry for the delay. So many delays today. With the Rumble was a problem as well, but everything's fixed now. How are you?
I'm great, and congratulations on getting on Rumble.
Yeah, Rumble is a little bit of a cost, but it actually they decreased the price very significantly, so we're okay with that.
Good.
And how is my mic here? But yeah, how is the election season? And this camera will get fixed soon. Don't worry about this. We'll find out what's going on.
That's great because I don't want to be here alone. And the election season is going very well. As you can see, the polls are very, very close. People are talking about this election now, especially now that we've passed Labor Day and now we're getting into back to school this week. People are getting involved. Advanced voting starts this weekend. So those of you who are in Ontario, I'm not sure about the rest of the country, but this weekend advanced voting starts. It starts Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. at your local advanced voting location. You should be getting a voter's ID card in the mail. If you did not, I recommend you either contacting the candidate that you're interested in voting for or checking out Elections Canada's website, which is elections.ca. You type in your home's postal code. It will tell you exactly what riding you're in, what your poll number is, where you vote for the advanced voting, where you vote on election day. Now, I would highly recommend people not to wait until election day because with the COVID restrictions, what you're going to find is that they are going to be only allowing a certain number of people inside the building and more people will be lining up outside. And then poll workers will bring people in as they come in. I personally like voting during the advanced voting, and I think that's the easiest thing for everybody to do. Welcome, Joe.
Welcome. I'm back to life, and I'm
Yay.
too loud for my. Am I coming across loud? Too loud to you?
No, you're coming very clearly. I'm just very hyper today. I don't know.
I don't know why, but yesterday they told me I'm coming too soft, but then on my ear, it's blasting in my ear. So I don't know. There's a problem with my microphone. It's really loud on my ear whenever I talk, but that's okay. I'll put up with it. I'll find out what the problem is. So, Richard, man, this election is kind of weird. I heard that we are spending $600 million for this one, 100 million more than the usual, and but it's a snap election. It's a quick election, and it's just an opportunity for us to get rid of Trudeau. But I don't know if you had a chance to watch yesterday's last night show. I was kind of playing advocate or devil's advocate because everybody in the panel was um, all about doesn't matter if we get rid of Trudeau or not. And I am like on the position of I think that's the highest priority for this election.
I agree.
I don't know if you did you had a chance to see while I ask you this question, I'm gonna change my setting here. It's really
Okay.
loud in my ear. But did you had a chance to see last night's? I was wondering if you can give some input
I
on.
would love to give input. No, I haven't unfortunately had a chance to see it. I promise you by September 21st, the day after Election Day, I will then be able to take a deep breath and be able to watch it.
I'm just trying to turn down. I think
But while
that
you're turning it down, I do want to address that one point. Yeah, $600 million election, over $500 million of
oh my,
taxpayer money for this unnecessary and unneeded election that nobody wanted. The most important thing is that in the French language debate, which happened last week on TVA, Trudeau said that if he were to get another minority, he will drag us back to the polls for another election in another 18 months, spending another $600 million. So this is a guy who not only admitted he doesn't understand fiscal policy and monetary policy, and he said it like off the cuff as if it's no big deal. But what's disgusting is that he said he will bring us back to the polls in another 18 months if he gets a minority. So it's really key that Trudeau does not get another minority.
I'll oh, now it's too low. I'll give my version of what I heard Trudeau said when
Okay.
he was doing his interview. Sorry, I couldn't see you. He was saying, "I apologize. I forgive me if I'm not gonna talk about fiscal policy because that's something I don't know about. So let's talk about something else." I think that's what I heard in my ears. What he was saying to me. Not exactly those words, but he admitted that he doesn't know anything about fiscal policy, doesn't he?
Not shocking at all. Not shocking at all. This guy doesn't know anything about anything. He has his agenda. He has his puppet masters. They're on a track to destroy Canada, to dilute our nation, to destroy the fabric and fiber of our nation. I've been saying this loudly for the last year and a half, and everything that he does has been proving me right.
Well, forgive me for I don't have a monitor. I'm trying to put the monitor here. So if I'm looking down, I don't mean to everybody who's watching the show. I don't mean to snub you. I was watching last night's show. I look very snubbish for looking away from the camera.
Well, then I feel
But
just as bad because I'm getting texted on my phone and I never look at my phone, but because it's campaign season,
it's
I almost
campaign,
have
yeah.
no choice. So I'm trying to tell people I'm sorry, I'm a little bit busy right now.
Well, everybody, please be forgiving with it's campaign season. Just imagine you're watching CNN, and it's by default that CNN people are rude. They look away from the camera, and no, just imagine this is like the newsroom where people are so busy trying to put together the news. So please be forgiving that we are busy at the same time we're doing this. But last night, I am we had this guest who was formerly the head of the Libertarian Party of Ontario,
Okay.
and so he left the party, and I think what he has a new man or a new mission to help independents, sort of like give guide on what to do, how just like all the processing. I think all the admin stuff, how to get a nomination, how to enter a ballot, deadlines, how much money, how much signature, blah blah blah. So the admin stuff of becoming an official a candidate has something that from being the leader of the libertarian party to just right now looking for individuals and sort of helping them. So he's not even the manager, but he's sort of like we all we are all independent, but we kind of go under the sort of brand of an alliance of independence. So it's not a party, but I think so. I asked him the question: is it similar to the business model of what Rob Carbone was doing? Because Rob Carbone put together this brand or umbrella he calls the Republican Party of Canada, but he said it's not a party, it's just a brand. So he's going to go under a brand as an umbrella. So he said it's not like Rob Carbone. This is just individuals running as independents, but he will be helping them, and they all kind of have some sort of like alliance with each other. So that's interesting, and I thought that might be a good idea because I guess if you run as independent, it's a steeper climb for you to climb, wouldn't it?
Well, the only independent that I've ever known who won an election is Jody Wilson-Raybould. And even Jane Philpott, who is more qualified as a minister than her, when she ran as an independent, she lost. I don't know if she came in third
Oh,
or fourth place.
Jane Pillvolt lost her seat.
Yeah, Jane Philpott
Oh,
ran in 2019 as an independent, same as Jody Wilson-Raybould. Jody Wilson-Raybould at least had the Indigenous community and had a lot of love around her because of what she did with Trudeau, that people would vote for her. But Jane Philpott, the same thing, ran as an independent in her own seat, and she lost.
mm,
So I don't recommend. I haven't seen the video, so I can't judge without seeing the video. But I don't recommend this because what people don't understand is statistically the best name brand candidate. I'm not talking about the leader of a party. I'm talking about the best name brand candidate. At best, gets 10% of the vote is just based on their name. At best, even if they were a minister and they're very well known, maybe you could stretch it out to 15%. And in fact, the one who just was repeating that today was our good friend Kostas Menegakis. I was on a video conference with him, and he was telling everybody, name recognition gets basically 4 to 10%. I usually say it's 5 to 7, 10 max. He said it's max 15 if the person was a minister. The rest is all based on the party name. People vote based on a party. So you run as an independent. I don't know how much you're going to have to spend to just get your name across. Unless you're some big name person in the community, it's going to be very, very difficult to win.
so let me ask you, because last night I understand. So my co-host Rebecca and two guests. One is a candidate. One is the former leader of the Libertarian Party, who's helping with the admin stuff. And they are very passionate about vote with your heart. And I brought to the discussion about what we talk about here on Power Chill Politics about voting based on strategy, voting, sort of like the baseball analogy of knowing the numbers, how to win. And I took the opposite position because they were all three vote according to your conscience, according to your heart. So I took the position of not necessarily my only conviction or belief, but I took the position of the opposite and says, let's talk about strategy because nobody among the independents or not even Derek Sloan or Maxime Bernier, and I shared this to you that I thought, the reason I'm helping the Conservative Party to win is because they're the only hope to get rid of Trudeau. But unfortunately, you didn't had an opportunity to watch it. I told them, I'm gonna take the opposite position, and there comes a it became an intense conversation that there was a point that it felt like I'm being gang up on, but of course I intentionally took the opposite of what they're passionate about, and I was saying that the priority for this election is to get rid of Trudeau, and for the three of them, like that's not the priority. The priority is vote based on your heart who you think is the best for the riding. And so there's so many discussion that came about from that main kind of contention. And yeah, I said, there's no other viable contender to get rid of Trudeau except for Erin O'Toole at this time. And they're like, they don't care who's going to be the next prime minister. They care about the community, the local community, the riding. So last night I took the opposite position of them. So tonight let me try the other way.
Sure, no problem. I just want to address some of the
Yeah.
points you made. It's wonderful to have passion, and I find that a lot in our Freedom Fighter network. They have a lot of passion. They understand the issues. They talk about it and express it very well. But the problem is when you're dealing with passion alone, which is an emotion,
Yeah.
it kind of negates the side of your brain, which is the logic. If you're focusing
That's
just
right.
on the emotion and you're not looking at the logic, then you can't be strategic or analytical. Okay. And I tend to be very strategic and analytical and much more logical than I am emotional. All right. So for example, you mentioned Maxime Bernier. Remember, Maxime is not an independent. Maxime registered a party, the People's Party of Canada, the PPC. And to this day, in the last election, in the by-elections, he has been unable to win his own seat, let alone a seat for the PPC. And he ran candidates in maybe almost all of the 338 ridings. In a vast majority of them, he had candidates. None of them got more than a few hundred votes compared to, thousands of votes for, the Conservatives or the Liberals or the NDP. So how can you expect a registered party like the PPC that couldn't even get a seat for their leader, and yet an independent is going to run? And remember, Maxime Bernier has national name recognition. Everyone knows what he looks like. Everybody knows his name. The party's registered. It is a national party from coast to coast, and it still couldn't win a seat. Same with the Libertarian Party. The Libertarian Party is a national party. Okay, it's a national party that is registered. They run candidates in some ridings. They have never been able to get a seat. Same with the Green Party. The Green Party is a major political party in Canada. They raise money, they have donations, they have a leader, etc. I think they have 3 seats in Parliament before it was dissolved. Now maybe they may only have 1 seat. Their own leader, their new leader, Anime Paul, may not even have a seat. She doesn't have a seat right now in Parliament. And that's a major party like the Green Party. So how can an independent who may not have the same network be able to raise the funds to run an election against a machinery like big parties like the Conservative Party, the Liberal Party, the NDP, when parties like the PPC and the NDP can't do it? How's an independent going to do it? I mean, it's just, listen, with all due respect, it's a great idea, but can the rubber meet the road? I haven't seen it happen. The only one I've seen is Jody Wilson-Raybould, but she had recognition in her riding nationally with her name, and people felt sorry for her for what happened, so they all stood behind her and voted for her. But Jane Philpott didn't win. Same situation.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't even come in second place.
Philpott didn't even come second place, right?
Yeah, I don't
So
remember she came third or
yeah,
fourth. I mean, she fell far behind, and she was the sitting MP and a minister in multiple portfolios for 4 years, from 2015 to 2019. And she's well known. I mean, she's a doctor at Markham Stouffville Hospital, and her riding is Markham Stouffville.
and she is well known in that.
And she's well known, and she didn't win. So I mean, it's like you got to get real. It's really nice to be emotional. It's really nice to have passion.
Yeah.
It's really nice to have dreams. But I've always said, there's the ideal world, then there's the real world. And I live in the real world.
So so I'll take just because it's for good television.
Sure.
I'll take their position, which
Please do.
which I was opposing yesterday. And before that, I want to say, okay, there's something I'm trying to remember here. Okay, folks, we are still not allowed to broadcast on our 15,000 follower page. And I think just because they really don't like our message. But we have Rumble today, folks. And Rumble is something that we can build and it will never get censored. So, everyone, please get the link on Rumble, which I posted for the preview or the teaser for the show tonight. Get the link. Please share it on your messenger everywhere. Folks, we really need your help.
And Rumble is way better. Rumble has a wider scope than Facebook. I mean, Facebook is huge, but nobody necessarily wants to see a Facebook video, but they will subscribe to Rumble. Rumble's way better. So that was a great step on your part. Congratulations.
Thank you. And I thought Rumble is the best choice because compared to other similar platform like BitChute and brand new to YouTube, and Getter is also having video now. I heard a lot of these other alternative are echo chambers, so nobody else goes to those platforms except for conservatives. Rumble has pretty much they also have the left and progressives there. So back to our conversation, Richard. So my question is, there are countries in the world where people win because of personality. People win because of campaigning as a name recognition. So, like in the United States, you can easily win if you're an actor, for example, like Ronald Reagan, Donald Trump. These are faces that we know even before they become politicians. They are very recognizable. So in Canada, it's hard to go by name recognition. Question is it because of just our political culture and people are just so used to, like, let's go with this party and who cares who the person is, let's just, I like this their platform, and I was born and my parents were born red or my parents were born blue, and I grew up in a community that's blue, and so I'm always going to vote. Doesn't have to be critical thinking, but just that's the traditional way I vote. Is that the reality in Canada, or there's other reason why we don't really kind of get to know the individual contender candidate before voting?
Okay, so yes and no. A lot of times people vote on a party line. So they're liberal, they vote liberal. They're Democrat, they vote Democrat. They're Republican, they vote Republican. They're conservative, they vote conservative. Yeah, a lot of times that's the case. Or their parents, they grew up a certain way in a certain household, and everyone in their community voted a certain way, and that's what they're used to, and that's what they're comfortable. That's the same case in Canada as it is south of the border. The difference, like, you have to understand, when you mention names like Donald Trump or you mention names like George W. Bush, these are election campaigns. Remember that in the United States, an election campaign easily costs upwards of several $1 billion. Each major party may spend $1 billion each. So that's the first thing. Whereas in Canada, we have much more lower limitations on what we can spend. But that being said, people know the name Justin Trudeau. People know the leaders' names, Aaron O'Toole, etc. They know the leaders' names. They don't know the individual candidates on the ground, unless it's the same person over and over and over and over again. So when you're comparing an independent to a leader of a party, it's two different things. You have to compare an independent with, say, for example, the incumbent MP. They're going to know the incumbent MP's name because they get a mail out every few months from that incumbent MP, which is paid for by taxpayer dollars, right? So they see that name regularly. They'll see the same name on the ballot. But an independent, he or she is going to have to spend a fortune of money just to get their name out there and spend a few years beforehand building that network.
So I am I'm total 100% agreement with you when it comes to this particular election. There's no other way to win this except to really make it our goal to get rid of Trudeau, or at least diminish his minority even less. Right? That's my thought about this particular election. However, I also can see the perspective of the other side of this argument, where I think what they want to see Canada is to have a reformation, both in the way we vote and culture, the political culture in Canada. And I actually agree with that, except I don't think it can be done this election cycle. It has to be a long term. If they're saying what we need to do is to have more independents taking seats in parliament, and I totally agree with that idea. But there's not enough number for this particular election. We don't have a
Mhm.
lot of independent running now. Why I think it's a good idea to have more and more independent winning, but you said they're it traditionally is very difficult to win as an independent. But if we have something different has happened in our society this past 18 months, and I think a lot of people are starting to get angry because of what we've been under. And if they kind of redirect that anger and to actually be actively involved in the elections, or rally around the person that they want to see as their MP in their neighborhood or in their riding, and they come out in droves, maybe we can change the culture a little bit. Except we don't have that kind of number of independents this cycle. But don't you think in the future that would be a good Canada to have more independence, as opposed to a lot of MPs going either red or blue, and they end up being whipped anyways by the leader of the opposite of their party. So they end up not really advocating for the needs and what the riding really wants for their riding. What do you think of that?
So there's a few different ways to look at it. Number one, even if you had an independent running in each riding, remember that the system is a first past the post, meaning that whoever wins in each riding has to get the most number of votes. Whoever gets the most number of votes wins that seat. So you have to think strategically that if you think that Canadians, some of us are awake over what's happened in the last 18 months, but are the majority of us awake? I don't think so. So you're still going to get the majority. If the majority have been vaccinated, if the majority are wearing masks, if the majority are following the rules, if the majority are even 50-50 saying vaccine passport, and those are the ones voting, then they're not going to be voting for an independent. The independent is going to fall far down on the list. So that's the first thing that anyone who runs as an independent has to be very realistic about. Unless you have the majority of people, a wave of people in one particular riding voting one particular way, you're not going to succeed as an independent. Secondly, I agree with you. I've always been concerned about whipped votes, and that it would be very good if you have a bunch of independents in parliament or in the legislature provincially. The problem with that then becomes you may have absolute nothing happening as far as something being passed. Imagine you put forward a bill. Okay, how could you even really have a government? Because if there's a government, if everyone's an independent, then you can't have a party with the most number of seats. You'd have to basically create a coalition. Still, you're going to create a coalition on the left and a coalition on the right. And whoever decides to have a coalition together, they have to appoint a leader, and that leader becomes a prime minister. If everybody's an independent and there's no party coalition or no party, then how are you going to have a prime minister? That part's not going to work. The next problem becomes is, say if one independent puts forward a bill, are you going to have enough votes to have 170 votes to pass the bill. You may not have that, right? If there's so many independents, you're going to have 338 different opinions of what should be included in that bill, and the legislation is just going to get frozen. It's just going to get stuck. Nothing's going to move because everyone's going to have an opinion and nothing's going to happen. So it's a wonderful in theory, but in actuality, could it actually work? I think it's very hard to say so.
It's very hard. I understand, but I think what's happening. Kind of, let's walk back a little bit and talk about first past the post. So winning an election, let's say there is 100 people in a riding, 60 of them are leaning conservative, and then only 40 are liberals, right? So if you only have two parties, the conservatives will win. But then the problem recently is we see maybe a third party or an independent coming into the scene, and this independent is also running on like a conservative principle. And so what happened is a third person in the mix is taken away from the incumbent, either the incumbent conservative or the one who's competing, and he or she has 60% supposedly if he doesn't have any independent in the mix.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So the problem is you might have 60%, but you split the 60 between two conservatives, and that gives the liberal the win.
Yeah, and I've explained that to people a lot, especially with regards to PPC.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't understand it. I mean, PPC voters really just don't grasp that concept. And talking to a PPC supporter, it's no different to me than talking to a liberal. They're just like a cult-like mentality, and they don't grasp how things really work.
So what if people, instead of like fighting over the 60%, and it seems to me that it might be true that the entire country is more conservative leaning if every riding is about 60% conservative. The only problem is the 60% is getting split between two or three contenders. What if we increase that number to 70%? Like, as opposed to 60, work hard in bringing more people to understanding the conservative principles. So if you have, let's say, 70 or 80% of a riding that are now leaning conservative, even though you have two conservatives fighting for the 80% or the 70%, either of them will win, and the liberal won't win, right? Because the liberal will end up only with 30% of the riding. Does my number work right? My
I
thought
get where
is,
your numbers are, but I'm going to give you the actual factual numbers. So understand that in any given riding in Canada, the actual vote turnout is anywhere from 45 to 60%, maybe 62, something like that. 45 to low 60s%. So the vote turnout is actually it's not full, it's not complete, it's actually not as good as it could be. Understand also that at any given time, the core conservative vote out there is about 35%, maybe 34, maybe 37. You need about 37 to 40% just to win a majority in this country. And the core conservative vote is about 34, 35%. The core liberal vote is anywhere between 32 to 37, 38% as well, depending on which way it goes for the liberals. But what happens is sometimes NDP voters will vote liberal just to stop or block the conservatives. So they go and choose the liberals instead of choosing the NDP. Sometimes the NDP is strong and the NDP vote tally rises, and so the liberal vote tally decreases. So you're not going to get 60% that are conservative in this country. It really is a split. 1/3 are conservative, 1/3 are liberal. There's, a certain number that are NDP that sometimes jump on the liberal bandwagon, and a good 1/3 who just never come out and vote at all. If you can educate that 1/3 that never come out to vote to understand how important their vote is, and get them to come out to vote,
That could be
then
a
maybe you can get them to come onto the conservative bandwagon. But also understand that a lot of people who don't vote, say if they're younger, say if they're millennials, say if they're younger, like the younger generation, Gen Z, like very beginning Gen Z, or even some Gen X, they may have been trained in university with really Marxist and left-wing philosophies where they don't understand. They just think, oh, university should be free. Education should be free. We shouldn't have any debt. We shouldn't have any expenses. The government should subsidize us. The government should give us handouts. All that stuff, critical race theory, all that stuff that they're taught in universities brainwashes them to think leftist without understanding that these leftist policies have been tried time and time again, whether it was the former Soviet Union or communist China or Cuba or Venezuela right now. Any of these cases, they've been tried and they've been epic failures. But people don't understand that because they always try to repackage communism as, oh, this is good for the general people, and it never works out. So basically, if you can capture the people who are not committed to any one party, who never come out to vote, that 1/3, and educate them why conservative values make more sense and will benefit them in their day-to-day life. And if you can grab 10% of that, 1/3 of that 33% to come out and vote, then you could really cause real effect and change in an election.
So there are a lot of political culture that if we want to reform, there's a lot of work to be done. One of them is trying to get the people come out, really participate in the election. Those who are not coming out. So you mentioned something about NDPs sometimes they know that they're not gonna win anything, so they throw their support to the Liberals. Why cannot an independent or a third party who is leaning conservative do the same and throw their support to the conservative, like the NDP does for the Liberals?
Well, unfortunately, the left-wing mentality, liberals and NDP, as I said, is more of a cult-like mentality, and they vote strategically, whereas conservative-minded people tend to be independent. And we believe in the individual. We believe in the independence and the rights of the individual. So therefore, you have right-wing parties that you have many different points of view, whereas in the left wing, they're cultish and they have really just one point of view, which they share amongst themselves, right?
Very good point. Yeah, very good point.
So this is the problem that the right-wing parties, say for example, the PPC, they're supposed to be a right-wing party. Maxime Bernier is an offshoot of the Conservative Party, and yet you'll never see conservative voters saying, oh, well, I'm going to vote conservative to block Trudeau. They'd rather screw the Conservative Party than to worry about Trudeau, which makes no logical sense whatsoever. And this is unfortunately the problem on the right. The right are very independent-minded people, which is wonderful, and very individually minded people, and they believe in individual rights. And so they don't vote strategically in that way. And that tends to be the downfall on the right.
Well, another layer of the problem that came out, this specific, I don't know why that's not working. Okay. So on another problem on top of that already existing, I think that's pre-existing in every election since you were participating in elections. Maybe that has been always been the case, that the Liberals are cultish in collective in their thinking, collective in their approach, and the right, because we love free societies, free speech, and the rights of the individual. People think individualistic, which I think you can't think individualistic, but you should also have that mind of a team player from time to time. But now, on top of that, already matter of fact, I think this particular election, a lot of conservatives, they feel that, and this had come so many times in last night's conversation, that Erin O'Toole is a controlled opposition. So they're like, this is what you hear from many conservatives who are very angry right now. It's like they don't care if Erin O'Toole becomes prime minister. They feel like it's not going to change anything, right? It's not going to change anything.
I that was the case before the election was called. I felt that in a lot of ridings. I did feel that sentiment from a lot of people. The moment the election was called, the temperature changed right away. And I'll tell you something, people are saying whether they like Aaron O'Toole or not, they hate Trudeau far more than they don't dislike or don't know Aaron O'Toole. So they will vote for the Conservatives, and yet you're seeing in the polls, the polls all of a sudden turned around after the election was called. The Liberals were easily in the head. They were whether they were in majority territory or strong minority territory right before the election was called. The moment Trudeau called the election, all of a sudden the polls changed, and you saw the Conservatives are in the lead, or they're neck and neck with the Liberals. So the fact is that the thing I'm hearing at the door is, if there are disgruntled Conservatives that say that they may not like Aaron O'Toole or he wasn't their pick for the leadership, the reality is they hate Trudeau so much that, and they don't want to, and they want to make sure he doesn't have an election, a victory, or become the prime minister again, that they are staunchly voting Conservative to knock off Trudeau, whether it's Aaron O'Toole or whoever. They'll deal with the leadership issue later, another time. They just want to make sure Trudeau is no longer in power. You see the sentiment on the street. You see how angry people are against Trudeau, and you see it in these events that he goes to. I mean, it's mostly PPC people who are hurling rocks at him, and swearing at him. But the reality is, people are at the door. They're really upset with Trudeau. So I'll tell you, the mood has changed after the election was called.
Well, I can tell you, I'm a conservative, and I'm exactly what you just described right now. So before the election, I feel like, yes, I kind of see when people say that Aaron O'Toole is possibly a controlled opposition. So I'm a little bit hesitant. But then after the election was called, my anger against Trudeau is much stronger than my doubts. Because there's really honestly, there's a lot of insinuation and a lot of doubt against Aaron O'Toole, but there's really no evidence that he is, in the pockets of the Liberals, or he is controlled opposition and he's just trying to make the Liberals win again. I really feel that maybe he is um influenced by some inner circle or some people who are, but I think comparing Trudeau and O'Toole, it's like night and day. I would really dump Trudeau anytime and go for O'Toole. But people are saying last night in the show that O'Toole will do exactly the same when he becomes prime minister. He will exactly do the vaccine passports. He will also push for mandatory vaccinations and the lockdowns and all that. Um, Help me out, because I addressed that last night, and I said this is what I said to last night's panel. I was saying, if you if you elect a liberal in your riding, that liberal will not be able to do anything for your riding, because that liberal MP will have to just do exactly what Trudeau tells them. But if you elect a conservative, and maybe that conservative, yes, is being whipped by the leader of the party, but if you put enough pressure on that conservative MP, that MP will, push it upwards, whatever you're trying to get across to your local MP. But then, I kind of told I was told that I was wrong about that. I was wrong about that, because they were saying that the blue, or the conservative, has become another cultish liberal, except they're still branded as blue. I don't know if I can accept that. Maybe in some writings, but for example, Pierre Polyev, I don't think Pierre Polyev and some of Kostas Menagakis and many of these conservative uh, contenders that we know, they are going to be following their convictions as well, and will push for what their constituents will ask them to push for. Wouldn't you think? How do I answer that question?
Okay, so there's so much there to unpack. So, first of all, if you ask my opinion, I would say that the party that's trying to help Trudeau is certainly not the Conservative Party. The party that's helping Trudeau is the PPC, because the PPC is only stealing votes away from the Conservative Party. And what happens is exactly what you discussed, which is when you steal votes away from one of the major parties, it allows the Liberals to run up the middle and to win those seats. And I'll give you a perfect example what happened in the last election in Richmond Hill with Kostas Menegakis. Costas lost. He was ahead in all the vote count all through the night. But at the end of the night, when the overseas ballots were counted, he lost by only 212 votes. The PPC candidate in the riding, who has no political experience at all, won 507 votes. Now, which is ridiculous because Costas had 20,000 votes, 20,000 plus. The Liberal had 20,000 plus votes. There was only 212 votes in between the two of them. It's like a 1% difference between the two. And the PPC only got 507 votes, but had half of those votes from the PPC gone to the Conservative would have had the seat. What happened was 507 votes with the PPC, and Costas lost by only 212 votes. The Liberal was able to regain the seat and keep the seat. So Trudeau had one more seat in his artillery, right, in Parliament. That's the big concern. So you want to divide the vote? The PPC is the one dividing the vote. You want to help the Liberals? The PPCs are the one that are helping the Liberals. And the proof is in the pudding because that's what happened in last election only, 19, 20 months ago in 2019. That's one thing to be said. The second thing to be said is talking about mandatory vaccinations and all of that. Listen, love the people that you had interviewed yesterday. I'm friends with them. I like their points of view. But again, as I said at the beginning of the show, when you think with your emotions and you think with your passion, it clouds your logic and it clouds your reasoning, and you aren't able to think through strategically or analytically. If they're talking about mandatory vaccine passports of the Conservative Party, then that shows me that they have not read at all the Conservative Recovery Plan for Canada. Go online to conservative.ca, look at the Conservative Recovery Plan for Canada, download it, and you look through it. And one of the key sections is talking about vaccinations. What the Conservative Party and Aaron O'Toole have been talking about is no mandatory vaccinations. He's saying he believes in vaccinations. I believe he was vaccinated. He believes in it and he's trying to promote it. That's his choice. However, the Conservative Party is the only party that I know of that doesn't bother to track whether their candidates have been vaccinated or not. The Liberals and the NDP will only take you on as a candidate if you have been double vaccinated. If you haven't been, they will kick you out and you won't be on the ticket. The Conservatives will ask in the interview of candidates, have you been vaccinated or not? But then they will follow up and say, you don't need to answer the question. Okay, I know that from candidates that have been interviewed, especially first-time candidates. They've been asked, have you been vaccinated or not? But you don't need to answer the question. And if you don't want to answer the question, you don't have to. So if you look at the Recovery Plan for Canada, the Conservative Party platform is very clear. No mandatory vaccinations. They recommend vaccinations, but no mandatory vaccinations because it's against your individual rights. It's very, very clear. It's right there in the platform. So if anybody says otherwise, they don't understand what the Conservative Party platform is all about.
All right. So I don't know why this is not working, but I have a follow-up question. Two questions on both things that you unpack. So maybe backwards first. Okay. So mandatory vaccination. Um, what I got from the feeling so one of the guests yesterday was a liberal candidate who her name is Lady O. I can't remember Lauren something. Her writing that she's condemning. She was a liberal, and then when she got turned off by the liberal, she started looking at the conservative, and then she kind of realized that the conservative is also kind of treating her the same, and that's the reason she's going independent now. They feel that because Erin O'Toole kind of go against the majority of the party when the party said they prefer not to have carbon tax during the leadership race, and he's like, no, who cares about what the party wants? This is what I want as a leader. uh, do you think he might do the same when it comes to the issue of vaccines? So that's the first part. The second part, when it comes to the question of like a third party splitting the vote of the conservative, why do it's because you're a numbers person, so how can we assume that, let's say, this PPC, in your example, how can we assume that this PPC who got 500 votes took 500 votes away from Costas Managakis? It could easily be also said that he took 500 votes away from the liberal who might have been. So how do we know that the third player in the mix are only stealing from the conservative and not stealing from the liberals? So those
Okay,
are.
so the second part of your question is an easy one to answer. If you look, Maxime Bernier was supposedly in the lead in the leadership in 2017. He lost the leadership to Andrew Scheer. He got disgruntled. He says he's going to start his own party, and he left in a huff. Says, I'm not going to play in the sandbox anymore. I'm leaving. And he started his own party, the PPC. All right. So Maxime Bernier was originally a conservative, and let's consider Maxime Bernier as a libertarian. If you are a left-leaning person, if you're a socialist-minded person, you're going to vote liberal, you're going to vote NDP. You're not going to vote for Maxime Bernier, because why are you going to vote for someone who's a libertarian-minded person? So if you too were a Maxime Bernier leadership supporter and you got ticked off that Maxime Bernier did not win the leadership and you decided to follow Maxime rather than follow the Conservative Party, then chances are you are historically a conservative voter. That's the first thing. And second of all, if you never voted before, but you're libertarian minded and you like what Maxime has to say, then again, you are considered a right-wing kind of voter. So you wouldn't be a voting PPC or voting liberal or voting PPC or voting NDP, because those tend to be diametrically opposed. They're very different points of view on the political spectrum. So that's the first thing. What I did say was the PPC candidate in Richmond Hill, who never ran before, and there was no PPC before in 2019, got 507 votes. And the difference that Costas lost was 212. What I said was, if half of those people,
Just
say
voted.
for example, half
Yeah,
of them
got it.
voted conservative, then Costas would have won. So say if there was no PPC candidate, let's say half would have stayed home and not voted, and half would have probably been traditional conservative voters that got disgruntled and decided to follow Maxime Bernier. Had that not been the case, had Maxime, for example, stayed in the Conservative Party and not left in a huff with his big ego, then probably half of that 507, one could reasonably say, would have gone to Costas, and Costas would have actually won the last election. So that's where I'm getting my numbers. That's how I'm explaining to you the numbers. Now, the first part of your question, I apologize. I was so into answering the second part. What was the first part of the question again?
The first part is, what if Aaron O'Toole do the same
Right.
as he did during the leadership race regarding the carbon tax and do it with the vaccination?
Okay, so what Aaron O'Toole did with the carbon tax, and believe me, I'm not a fan of what happened with the carbon tax, okay? I don't like that he went that way. But as I've explained here, I understand why he went that way. It wasn't a case that he just said, I'm not going to follow the leadership, what the membership wants, and I'm going to do it my own way because I'm the leader. It was a case that he realized from the 2019 election that if we don't have a good environmental policy, we are not going to win seats in Ontario or Quebec. We're not going to rise up in the polls because we already played that strategy before in 2019. And although we won the popular vote, we didn't win enough seats because there's 121 seats in Ontario, and there's, I think, 80 something odd seats in Quebec. So together, that's 200 seats plus, and there's only 338 seats in all of Canada. If you can win every seat just in Ontario and Quebec and forget about the rest of the provinces, you'll win a majority in government. So you have to play the strategy. You have to understand how you have to appease Alberta and how you have to appease the Western provinces and how you have to appease Ontario and Quebec. And I think what he realized is, if I put together a carbon strategy, which is different than Trudeau's carbon taxation, which doesn't do anything, But if I put together a carbon savings account for people where they could spend that money rather than that money going in, see with Trudeau's carbon tax, he's taxing us on our home heating. He's taxing us on natural gas to heat our home, oil to heat our home. He's taxing us on gasoline that we use in our car, propane, whatever the case may be. And that money is just going into general revenue, and it's just going into to pay for all his, We Charity scandals and all the other things like that, SNC-Lavalin, etc. But the way Aaron O'Toole has strategized it is a carbon savings account where you can take back that money if you're going to be buying more carbon-friendly items. So you're going to see what money you have in that carbon savings account. It's a very, very different policy. But Aaron didn't just say it for the sake of, I'm not going to listen to the membership. He said, look, I understand that in order to win more seats in Ontario, in Quebec, I need to have a strategic carbon policy that is winnable and palatable to the average Canadian. And that's why he did it. So I don't necessarily think that that's going to be the same case with vaccine mandates. But that being said, you don't know what he's going to do. Let's say he doesn't do vaccine mandates, then you're happy. Let's say he does do vaccine mandates, then you're unhappy. But if you vote any other way, which gives Trudeau an opportunity, or the NDP, then you're guaranteed to have vaccine mandates. So what's better, a guaranteed vaccine mandate or the possibility that there may or may not be a vaccine mandate? You got to think strategically when it comes to a vote. If you think that everyone is going to vote for PPC, then go ahead and vote that way. And maybe with Bernier, you're not going to have it. Who's to say with Bernier you're not going to have it if people push down and put pressure on him? I mean, it's a nonsensical argument. The issue here is, at least with the Conservative platform, there is no talk about vaccine mandates. All right. So why not at least take your chance with someone who's saying it, rather than helping the Liberals or the NDP, who guaranteed are going to have vaccine mandates, vaccine passports, and tracking and tracing of every Canadian out there.
Exactly. So with that particular item, I'm really 100% with you that, I'd rather go with someone who has a chance to not have a vaccine mandate, even though it seems like they are fearing that he might be, just winning the vote now, and then after the election, he will do the opposite. I'd rather go with that person who might have a chance not to do it rather than the person who actually guarantees he will do it. So I am with you 100% on that one. So, and I was hoping that you were there yesterday too, because honestly, I like to listen to all kinds of sides of the argument, and I think you have a very clear way of explaining. And
thank you. I don't think they would have liked to have heard my answers, but
no, I think you would have explained it better than what I'm trying to accomplish yesterday. Which probably made it worse for that particular argument, because I was just not as eloquent with the way you explain it now. But that's a good thing. You can take very, very difficult question, and then here's one last very difficult question I want to ask you. I know you are a campaign manager for a Conservative. And this is probably something that you hear from some of the constituents in the riding that you're campaigning at. And this question, and then one last regarding a scenario that I see in case there are more. It seems to me that there are the PPC support is gaining ground. It seems to me a lot of people are talking to me when I go to protest. A lot of people seems to be leaning PPC. Okay, but let's leave that for the second question. But the first question right now, and
listen, I'm agreeing with you. I'm seeing a lot of PPC support too. But if the PPC support in a riding, because they're freedom fighters, is only 10%, then what you're doing is you're giving an easy ride to the Trudeau Liberals. Because the NDP, for example, they may decide to vote NDP, they might decide to vote Liberal, but the Liberals are going to come out and vote for Trudeau. So
I heard some Liberals are going to vote NDP because some Liberals are also angry at Trudeau.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Especially I'm finding in the under 34 age group, some people that might have voted for Trudeau in 2015 and 2019, they are ticked off with him and they are going to give Jagmeet Singh a chance. But back to the PPC, I get what you're saying. And as much as I really resonate with what's his name, Maxime Bernier, and I really like his platform, and I really wish he would win, but he hasn't even won his own seat. So I'm not going to throw my vote in such a critical time where we need to get rid of Trudeau for the PPC. When, say, for example, you see the crowds that are upset and they're coming upset with Trudeau and they're coming supporting PPC. If they're only 10% of the vote, then you're going to let the Liberals slide up the middle, as I've already explained what happened in Richmond Hill. And they're going to, the key is who's going to get the most number of votes wins the seat, even if it's by one vote. It's called first past the post. And if 10% of the votes now swing to the PPC, hey, that's great. But all of a sudden, that 10% is not enough to win that seat.
Mhm. Well, before my question, I just remember something. When I was helping churches as a minister, when I was helping as a layperson, helping ministers, sort of like grow the church. And I remember back in early 2000, late 90s, we always talk about the problem with evangelical churches in Ontario. A lot
They
of
don't
churches
vote.
in the election they don't vote. But let's just use this analogy right now. We're winning people to come to church at that time. So sort
Okay.
of like I'm gonna use that analogy, how to win people over to what you're marketing to. Let's call it marketing, right? One of the reason I kind of like shy away from the church business, because honestly there's a lot of similar business culture in the church, as same as in Bay Street. Anyways, let's not go down that rabbit hole. But when I was helping churches win more young people to come to church, university students come to church, they conduct some studies, and they found out that a lot of, if let's say we bring in some British bands, Christian bands, we have a big concert, and then for the next 3 weeks we have a surge of young people coming to our church, a lot of university students, and we have like a hip, cool kind of feel in the church now, because we just had audio adrenaline, or some of those British Christian bands coming to our church. And what happened though, they found out that a lot of this increase in the youth group in our church are actually just church transfers. So they're already Christians. It's not like it's the first time they heard the gospel and they have a change of heart from being non-Christian. Now they're Christians. These are already Christians from other churches. They just came over to our church because now they think our church is cool, right?
Okay.
So it's all about marketing. It's not trying to save the lost. In biblical evangelism, you share the gospel. You tell people, the kind of goodness that Jesus Christ did for humanity. And then if they have a change of heart, they give their heart to the Lord, they become Christians. That's a win. But when we were doing evangelism in the early 2000s, we realized there's really nobody winning from the lost. These are all just people who are already Christians, but they're coming to our church because our church is cool. We got like nice British bands coming and playing at our church in our worship. So maybe this is also sort of like when I'm thinking about election in Canada, between different factions of the conservative, different factions of the left side of the political spectrum, it seems to me there's a similarity with what I experienced with churches, where you are social conservative, but then maybe at Maxime Bernier's house is a little bit more cool than than O'Toole's house, and people are just transferring churches or houses, but we're not really winning those who hasn't seen why Canada is leaning socially conservative. Our values as Canadians are, why conservative values makes more sense for Canada than going along with this. Where it seems to me that there's very little effort to wake up those who are leaning left, why they are wrong in their ways, but
Mhm.
there's more effort on, like, let's win over, if you're CPC, let's take some from Bernier, or if you're Trudeau, let's take some from Jagmeet Singh, or Jagmeet Singh is thinking, how can I take away from Trudeau, because they're in the same kind of spectrum. You see what I'm saying? But how can we change Canadian political culture where we're trying to win those who are on the left and show them that it makes more sense for their future to understand conservative values?
I think it's very hard to get people on the left to understand conservative values because they're hard set in their ways. What you need to go is to people in the center and try to attract them over. So this is again what I was talking about with the carbon tax. Even though I may not agree with it, but I understand the strategy is to attract disenfranchised people who might have voted for Trudeau before, okay, in Ontario and Quebec in particular. And they're generally centrist minded people, the ones that I'm talking about, that you can then see that they're upset with what Trudeau has offered and they're willing to come over, but they weren't willing to come over in 2019 because we didn't have a viable environmental plan. So that's one thing. Again, let's go back to what I was talking about earlier at the beginning. There's about a third of the public, sometimes 40%, sometimes more, who don't vote. Actually, more than a third, 40-50% who don't vote in any given election.
So
And that's a
wait,
big,
those people who don't vote, can we say they're center or they're lazy right, that they're not coming out? If they come
I
out
think
and vote,
it's very hard to tell, because if they don't vote, we don't know which direction they're going. They may just be lazy, they might be disenfranchised, they may be disinterested, they may not understand that, they may think that their vote doesn't matter, they may think that it doesn't, so I go vote. What does it mean anything? They might be the type of person who they don't go to vote, but they complain about everything that's going on with the government, but don't realize that they need to vote in order to make a change. Could be so many different reasons. I think if you can go to them and cultivate why a center-right policies is more beneficial to them, then you can have a new base of voters that you can go to.
okay, so I'm gonna skip that one I said to, because we're coming close and you're very busy with the campaign trail. But
There are some questions I don't mind answering. I think we got a great number of questions today. I don't mind answering some of the
okay,
questions.
so a couple more from me, and
You go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
and then we'll go to the we got some good questions from the audience. But Richard, so a lot of people feel that what Erin did to Sloan, and what um, Lady O, the candidate for Lawrence something last night, who guested on the show, she felt like she saw firsthand that they orchestrated that Erin will win the leadership race. She strongly feels that the
Okay.
entire
Who is this Lady O person? I've never heard of this person before.
I can't remember
Was she an
for her.
actual candidate on the ballot?
Opa Opa Day. Check her out. opaday.ca. That's
How
her
do you
website.
spell that?
OPADAY. opaday.ca. So she's an actual candidate now, an independent candidate now in this election cycle. But she was liberal. I don't know if she was a candidate as a liberal, but she
She
was
was never a candidate as a liberal.
okay.
She
Uh,
probably didn't get greenlit by the liberals and didn't get accepted by the conservatives, and that's why she's upset.
Maybe. Yeah. So it's the first time I met her yesterday, and
Okay.
she was saying that she saw firsthand how the leadership race was orchestrated, that Erin O'Toole will win. We know a little bit about what happened to
But
James
how would she
Crowley.
see that if she wasn't a conservative member, if she was an independent?
Yeah, so I didn't go to that detail. But so I'm just telling you what I remember her telling me,
Okay.
that she saw that even many of those who are conservative, they know that they are going to vote for Sloan. They never got a ballot. I think that's what she was saying. A lot of people she knows in the conservative community never got a ballot, and so she feels that the entire leadership race for O'Toole were orchestrated. So if they believe that the leadership race was orchestrated to make sure that Erin O'Toole wins, therefore they come to a conclusion that Erin O'Toole must be a globalist because he has some puppet master pulling strings to make sure he wins, right? So, that might not be true. That might not be, so there's not enough evidence for that, but there's a feeling in the general public. I don't know if it's widespread, but there's a feeling in sectors of society who feels that way. What do you say to those who feel?
Well, then is Leslyn Lewis a globalist? Because Leslyn Lewis, I think, won the popular vote. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. Hmm.
Okay. Now, Derek, I like Derek Sloan. I like what he has to say a lot. And I've been very open and vocal about that. But Derek came in fourth place in the leadership. And Leslyn Lewis scored very highly in many, many, many places. There are places where Leslyn Lewis got more votes than Aaron O'Toole did in some ridings. But because the way every riding is weighted to have 100 votes, so Aaron was able to win more number of ridings and was able to carry it in the leadership. I mean, I supported Peter MacKay, not because I necessarily liked what he had to say, but because I knew that Peter MacKay would win this election hands down. He would win a majority for the Conservatives without a question. So I knew just from name recognition alone, Peter MacKay would be the right way to go. But there were a lot of people in the party that didn't want Peter MacKay. I still got my ballot. I still was able to vote. So I don't think that's the case, that people who wanted to vote for Derek Sloan didn't get their ballot, because no one would know which way you're voting. And, it's not like some devious kind of organization that knows how someone's going to vote. Oh, so we're not going to send them a ballot because they're going to vote for Derek Sloan. It doesn't work that way. Aaron, basically that analogy would have to believe that Leslyn Lewis is a huge globalist because she was able to successfully come out of nowhere and get a huge number of votes. It just, the whole thing doesn't make any sense at all. Like,
Leslyn Lewis really ran a good campaign too, and
Leslyn Lewis is a social conservative, and she ran a fantastic campaign. So is she a globalist as well? I mean, that being said, what about people talk about Bernier? Oh, Bernier is so wonderful, but Bernier has ties to the United Nations.
That's right.
So who are they talking about? Bernier is not a globalist when he has ties to the UN. Come on, wake up. I mean, people, I think, are delusional here. And at the end of the day, with thinking from their emotions rather than thinking from their logic, they're going to help Trudeau get a minority.
Do you know off top of your head what are the ratios right now before the election? Or how many seats for the Conservative? How many seats for the Liberal? And
it's very hard to say. I mean, most people go to, for example, 338 Canada, their website. I think they're predicting that
I'm not talking about what could happen. I mean, before the election.
Before the election.
Yeah.
It was 100. The Conservatives originally won 121 seats, and then a couple of people left. So I think it became 119 seats. The Liberals were at 150 something. I forgot the exact numbers, but it was.
So they're like.
Hold on. Sorry. In the last election, not just in the last election, but they lost some seats. The Conservatives had 121 seats, but I think they ended up with 119. The Liberals had 157 seats, but then they ended up with, I think, 154. Because some people were kicked out of caucus and some people left and whatnot.
I mean, so the Liberals only have maybe 30 more seats than the Conservative, and then the rest of them went to the NDP and the Bloc, I guess, right?
Right. So the in the last election, the NDP had 24 seats. The Bloc had 32 seats. They were officially the third largest party. The Greens had 3 seats. Now the Greens may only win 1 or 2.
What's the least number of seats can the Liberal hold on to still maintain a minority? 70 seats? Can you still be a minority government? 80 seats?
No, because if there's 338 seats total, then they would need at least 120. Say, for example, they had 120 seats, and then the NDP gained in seat count, and the Conservatives would have to be less than 120 seats. The Greens would have to go up. The Independents would have to go up. Maybe on 130, 120 seats, you could still be the government in a minority, but it would be very rare.
130. So the reason I'm asking this question, if let's say just a scenario where I see, let's say the scenario after, not maybe not this election, but any election that you end up with a scenario that, okay, we want to get rid of Trudeau, but it's very difficult because of all the social distancing and all the political correctness. People, it splits the vote. We have PPC splitting the vote against the CPC, and then the scenario where the Liberals ended up with 130 or 120, and the PPC, got more seats,
Right.
and the NDP lost a lot of seats, which I don't know if that's possible that the PPC took seats from the NDP or from the Greens. But now the Conservatives are split, but it still pushes the Liberal in a very, very tight minority, like 130 seats, and the rest were like split between CPC and
And PPC,
PPC. Yeah,
Bloc Québécois. Yeah.
yeah, that would still be a win because something like a Bill C-10 would still be very difficult for Trudeau to push through, wouldn't it?
Yeah, so something like a censorship bill like Bill C-10 would be very difficult for Trudeau to push through. But more importantly, luckily, you have a large number of conservative senators in the Senate, which can put a hold to C-10 and put it to question, which was exactly what was happening, right? So that's the case that people don't seem to understand. A lot of people that are talking PPC don't seem to understand how the Canadian political structure actually works. I mean, they have very lofty ideals, which is wonderful, but it doesn't actually work in reality. And I can't say, for example, if the PPC have a large number of seats, fantastic, that's great. But do you think someone like Maxime Bernier is going to work with Aaron O'Toole or whoever is the leader of the Conservative Party when Maxime Bernier's whole goal and ego is about destroying the Conservative Party? He doesn't mind destroying the Conservative Party even if it benefits the Liberal Party. It's just completely illogical. What people from the PPC don't understand, okay, and I see the comments from PPC supporters. What they don't understand is the PPC nowadays is no different than the Liberal Party because, let me explain, Maxime Bernier has a huge ego. Okay, just like Justin Trudeau. Justin Trudeau has built a cult of personality. He's taken the Liberal Party, the brand of the Liberal Party, and he's turned it into Team Trudeau and made it a cult of personality. Well, what do you think the PPC is? The PPC is a cult of personality for Maxime Bernier's huge ego. Maxime Bernier doesn't even have a seat, and he's still being paid over $100,000 a year as the leader of the PPC, and there isn't a single seat in Parliament for the PPC. The PPC is a cult of personality. You ask anyone in the PPC, does your party have a constitution, a party constitution? No. Does it have any leadership convention? No. Does it have any mechanism for any leadership challengers? No. What about if there's a dispute on a riding association level? Is there any mechanism for that? No. Everything revolves around Maxime Bernier. If Maxime likes you, great. If Maxime doesn't like you, tough luck. This is the problem with the PPC. And I think PPC supporters, some of them are very disgruntled from the last election and they have left the PPC. And others are just living in this delusion about the PPC, which is great because Max is saying just absolutely the right things. Well, but Max is also a United Nations guy. So just let's look at the base facts. There is no constitution for the PPC. There's no annual or biennial convention. There's no leadership race. There's nothing. There's no structure of a political party other than they registered their documents with Elections Canada, and here's your leader, Maxime Bernier. Good luck. And if you want to run, okay, whatever you want to run on. What's your platform? What are you really running for? Every candidate is running basically on their own platform, and it's all meshed together with kind of what Maxime believes in, but there's no formal structure to it.
Well, my suspicion is Maxime would be, first of all, he has to win his own riding before he maintains Can you maintain leadership of a party if you don't have your own seat? Number one. Number two, if he wins his own seat and he stays as the leader of the PPC, and the PPC wins more seats, I think my suspicion, Richard, is that it will be based on what is being debated on the table, item by item, issue by issue. I think if something is totally against the principle of the PPC followers, and it seems to be, it makes sense for Bernier to do a coalition with O'Toole, work with O'Toole on certain issues. Let's say C10, Bill C10, and other issues that the liberals bring to the table. Uh, I don't think Maxime Bernier would have a choice. He would have to listen to his constituent, and he will have to work with O'Toole, don't you think?
Well, I think Bernier is not going to work with O'Toole. He'll listen to his constituents, and I think that's great. And he'll vote accordingly. I don't think he's going to vote. If he can vote against the PPC, he'll do it in a heartbeat. But if it's a case of voting against Trudeau, I'm hoping that he would vote against Trudeau. So, I think you're right. It is on a case-by-case basis.
If he doesn't win his seat, who will be leading the PPC then?
He's still leading it. He hasn't won his seat ever. He ran in the by-election in 20. He ran in the election in 2019. Didn't win back his seat in both. He ran in outside of his riding here in Toronto in the by-election. I think at Toronto Centre, and I don't know. He came in 4th place or something like that. He didn't win that either.
So that's a little tricky for me. And like as you know, I'm newer to the parliamentary system than the American style system, as I told you before. But if Bernier doesn't win his seat, and he has members in his party who are elected MPs, those elected MPs have to listen to him and follow his directives?
Yeah, if he's still the leader. So take, for example, the Green Party. The Green Party elected Annamie Paul.
And she doesn't have a seat herself?
She doesn't have a seat, right? Elizabeth May has a seat, but she doesn't have a seat. She's still the leader, and the MPs are listening to her, theoretically, even though there's infighting in that party. But she's the leader without a seat, right? Jagmeet was the leader of the NDP, and he didn't have a seat before 2019.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, Jagmeet ran in the leadership. He didn't have a seat. Okay, then he ran. I believe it was a by-election, and he won his seat. Right, but when he was the leader, he didn't have a seat. So, and people were saying you should go have a seat. You should go have a seat. He had to wait until the by-election was called, and then he won his seat, if memory serves me right. And the same thing with the Green Party. So, for example, if there's going to be, becomes the problem with the PPC. So if there are fortunate PPC candidates to win their seat, okay, I can't see how statistically that could happen. But say there are, that the polls are so wrong, which is very possible, that the PPC wins a few seats. But they still have Maxime Bernier as the leader. They could choose to keep Maxime Bernier as their leader, but what I'm trying to explain to you is there is no constitutional mechanism within the PPC for those elected seat holders to challenge Maxime for the leadership.
Or so they can have their own leadership election within the PPC too, right?
They don't have that in the they don't have a constitution. So how are you going to call for it?
Maybe that's my political ambition, just to be a leader of a party and not run for a seat.
Well, there you go. So, that's fantastic. But say, for example, if there's some star candidate in the PPC that wins their seat and they want to challenge Maxime to a leadership, how are they going to do it if there is no fundamental constitution or regular leadership convention that stipulates how a leadership election is going to be run? Well, there's no party constitution. So basically, Maxime, like the king of his party, would have to say, I'm stepping down from the throne and I'm going to appoint Mr. or Miss X to be the new leader. There's no constitution. How are you going to do it?
I think that will only be true now that they don't have a lot of seats. Or I don't know, is there any PPC who has a seat right now?
No, there's no PPC. Nobody has won a seat. But not in the by-election and not in 2019.
If the PPC starts taking seats, then I don't think the status quo, Maxime Bernier will be forced to start creating the constitution and actually properly create this PPC as a.
Only if there's an uprising from the members. The members have to demand it. And right now, the members are just following I've told you, they're following a cult of personality, which is Maxime Bernier. The reality is it's a cult of personality. I know that PPC members don't like to hear that because their delusional way of thinking is no different than the way the liberals are. They follow their cultish leader blindly, no matter what happens. There's no logic to what's happening. It's all based on emotion.
Well, I'm gonna push back a little bit on that because I
Sure.
think a lot of PPC probably are going to PPC because they hate Trudeau. I
Sure.
think I think the reason a lot of PPC and they cannot, so they hate Trudeau and they cannot trust O'Toole
Right.
because honestly, if Derek Sloan was not in the picture, I might end up like looking at the PPC a little closer, really. But I think a lot of them is really PPC because they feel like the Conservative Party might not be the social conservative, the big tent you were talking about, right? And it's not the big tent anymore. But what do you think? A lot, because for example, that Mark Friesen seems to be level-headed. I don't know. I didn't really look into the PPC a lot close, but I really think that they really just hate what's going on in our country right now. Anyway, so it seems like we have some PPCs on the comment section who is pushing back against you, brother. But
I have
let's.
no problem with that. Listen, I support what they have. I support what Maxime stands for. I actually really like what Maxime stands for. But the question then ultimately becomes from a logical point of view. Am
The
I going
leadership
to
style,
vote? Am I
right?
going to leave the Conservative Party and vote for PPC,
Then
right? And risk having Trudeau get his minority again? Absolutely not. I'm
Mhm.
going to vote for the party that's doing well in the polls, that people understand, majority of Canadians understand the Conservative Party as an alternative to the Liberals, and so that they'll vote for the Conservative Party to get rid of Trudeau. The goal here is getting rid of Trudeau. The PPC people feel that the PPC is the way to go. Hey, that's great. I cannot see it historically and statistically that makes sense. Okay,
Theoretically,
it doesn't necessarily work that way, and
yeah.
the polls show that my way of thinking tends to be the right way of thinking. If I'm proven wrong, so be it. I'm so happy for that. I love learning something new.
What do you think of this, Richard? If we just get all of the PPC supporters that seems to be really gaining a lot of ground and increasing in numbers, if all the PPC theoretically, what do you think of this? All the PPC come and become CPC, become conservative. Can they change the CPC from within because of
Yes,
the sheer number,
yes.
right?
Because what will happen is, say, for example, if they all become conservatives, right? There's no point. You're not going to win a battle by doing what Maxime did, stomping off, saying, "I'm not going to play in your sandbox. I'm going to start my own party." You know, I said this before, and I've said this again. The fact of the matter is very simple. Had Maxime Bernier not been a hot-headed, emotional egotist in 2017, running off to start his own party, which he
We would
still could.
never have a Trudeau
Hold on. No, 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 no. Listen to what I'm saying. Had he not been a hot-headed egotist, he felt that he had the leadership stolen from him
from
by
him.
Andrew Scheer. I get it. I understand exactly where he's coming from. I sympathize with him. The fact of the matter is, had he just sat down, was a good constituent MP, okay, protected and dealt with his constituents, bit his tongue and bided his time, then in the last leadership race last year,
He would have
I
won.
bet you Maxime Bernier would have been the leader, not Aaron O'Toole.
Oh
But
yeah.
the fact of the matter is, he left the fold by his own choosing. Derek Sloan was kicked out. That's a different story. So I have sympathy for Derek Sloan. Maxime decided to take his toys and leave the playground and start his own party. Had Max just said, you know what, I'm going to show it to you, but I'm not going to start my own party. I'm going to sit here very quietly, be a good MP. I'm going
And
to
make
wait
a
for
change
my
within.
I'm going to wait for my turn. I'm going to change it from within. And the
Mhm.
next leadership, you know what, Andrew Scheer, you lost in the 2019 election. You stepped down. Now I'm going to run for leadership. And he already was the second person, the second place finisher in the leadership, a very close second place finisher. He had a golden opportunity to be the next leader of the Conservative Party. But because he thought with his emotions instead of thinking with his brain, you saw he lost his own seat. Okay.
Mhm.
This is the problem. And this is why PPC people don't think logically, because Maxime himself, as their leader, doesn't use logic, uses emotion. And therefore, what good has it done? Has he won a single seat? No. Has he won his own seat? No.
Well, you know,
He should have just bided his time. He would have
yeah,
been the leader, not Aaron O'Toole.
Richard, you know what Maxime Bernier said when he picked up his toys and started his own thing. He was saying that the Conservative Party was morally corrupt.
Yes.
That's what his claims were.
But
So
he could have fixed it from within.
yeah.
He chose not to. He chose to split the vote and divide it. So this is the problem. If all the PPC people were to go in and become Conservative members, then in the next leadership race, you vote
They
for
can do it.
Maxime Bernier.
Yes.
You would have Maxime as your leader. If you, for example, wanted to change the policies, okay, at the convention, you'd
And
have
the
the
PPC has
opportunity.
more money. If
Sorry?
if the PPC decide to do that today or on the next election, everybody becomes a member of the Conservative Party. Bring back Bernier because of the sheer number of the PPC, and they're growing and they might. I think the PPC people can actually win a lot of conservatives over to the social conservative stance of the PPC people. They can
But see,
actually.
that's the problem, Joe. The view of Maxime Bernier is not a social conservative. He's a libertarian. He's a fiscal conservative. He's not a social conservative.
Okay.
He doesn't
Um,
have that same point of view on a gender selective abortion. He doesn't have that same point of view on same-sex marriage. He doesn't have those kind of points of view. His point of
remember.
view is very correct when
Yeah.
it comes to the pandemic. I agree with his point of view wholeheartedly. I agree with many of his points of view when it comes to fiscal conservatism, but he is definitely not a social conservative. And what he tells his candidates is, you can vote whatever way you want when it comes to social conservative values. Go ahead, do whatever you want. But he's a typical Quebec guy that is not a social conservative.
I think I remember why Richard Decarie wouldn't throw his support to Bernier.
Right. Richard Descaries is a social conservative, and he's still, he's a conservative-minded person, and he's supporting Derek Sloan. So that gives you a perfect example. And you and I both have a great deal of respect for Richard Descaries.
Yes.
I have more respect for Richard Descaries than I have for Maxime Bernier.
All right. So finally, I ask all my questions, and thank you for being patient with me,
No
audience,
problem.
and Richard, for asking all. I when I ask questions, also it's not only for myself, but for all the people who ask me questions. I throw it to Richard because Richard knows his stuff. He knows how to handle these questions properly.
Because I play the bad guy here. It's okay. I play the big bad conservative insider. I'm that bad guy, which is funny to me because that's
that
not
they can win
that's
an
not the role I
election.
play.
But it would be very effective if I have some political ambition, but I don't. So I'm here asking the questions from a lot of PPC who follows us. Unfortunately, fortunately, that we have a lot of followers, both from within the freedom movement. A lot of people are also, especially those who follow Chris Guy. Chris Guy is so vehemently against Maxime Bernier. So we have,
So that's a perfect example for you. Hello.
all right. So there you go. Edward Ronquillo is saying, CPC, why go mandatory vaccination when we now know that experimental vaccine is killing people? From fast before 7 days to declare vaccine injury to slowly. Okay, so
So Edward, you are 1,000,000% right. And this is why I already answered that question, which was go to conservative.ca and look at the Canada Recovery Plan from the Conservative Party and look under the section about vaccinations. It clearly says that we do not recommend mandatory vaccinations. Our party does not support mandatory vaccinations. The Liberals do, the NDP do. We do not support mandatory vaccinations. What the Conservative Party says is they recommend people to get vaccinated, but they leave it up to your own personal choice.
And hello to David Carlson.
Hello, David Carlson. I know you have more comments further on down the line.
He is undecided at the moment. Just keep note of that.
Fair enough.
Fabian Katri is asking, and I have to read from here. That's an interesting concept. Most people are still asleep. We have to read this because some people are listening to our Zeno FM app. Hurts to admit, but I think you are bang on. However, I feel like there's a large majority that never vote that might throw in a proverbial wrench into the works with a big if they are awakened, pissed enough. I don't want to use that word. But
exactly. And I was saying the same kind of thing.
Yeah. Red, blue, yellow said 1/3 don't vote. You should what? Broke that up into quarters. So that's a scary swell of nap signs on people's lawns here in Saskatoon. Ironically, seeing a lot of
okay. So Saskatoon maybe is a different scenario. All right. We're from the GTA, we're from Toronto. So yeah, Saskatoon is a different case, and there are people now that you see it even in Alberta. There's that odd thing between the Conservatives versus the NDP. The Liberals are really nowhere to be found. Saskatchewan, I don't think really anybody wants to vote Liberal. It's very, very rare. But yeah, I don't want you to misunderstand what I was saying. And the numbers, the way you've written it, don't add up. And I didn't want to I want to clarify it. So basically 32 to 37% on average is the Conservative base support, okay? And you need about 37 to 40% in order to get a majority government. We saw that with Trudeau, we saw that with Harper, etc., in Harper's last term. Now, that being said, there's about another third that is somewhere in the left-leaning column, whether it's generally the Liberals, split between the Liberals and the NDP. The NDP sometimes grow bigger or smaller depending on that case. So sometimes they like their party leader, like they liked Olivia Chow's husband. I forgot his name.
Jack Layton.
Jack Layton, thank you very much. So they like Jack Layton, and he became the official opposition. He scored big in that election. So people liked him, and NDP voters voted from some Liberal voters. There's many Liberal voters that are like Liberal NDP. They switch between both sides, but they're traditionally Liberal, but they sometimes vote NDP. There's many that are NDP voters that, oftentimes they're scared of the Conservatives, so they vote Liberal to block the Conservatives. So it's 1/3 over there. Then there's about another third that just don't vote at all. But I've seen in some ridings where the percent who vote are, 65% vote and 35 don't. So let's say it's a third. I've seen some ridings where it's less than 50% who come out to vote. So in riding by riding basis, it really depends. It could be a riding basis where, there's like 30%, 28% that are Liberal, 10% that are Conservative, and 50% don't vote at all. That could be the case in some ridings. I'm saying in general in Canada, it's about a third that don't vote, a third vote for the left-wing parties that switch back and forth between Liberal, Green, NDP, and a third who vote Conservative.
Do you think that Jack Layton's NDP and Jagmeet Singh's NDP are, night and day apart? Are they the same?
I wouldn't say night and day, but they're two different leadership styles, and there's two different ways of looking at it. Back in Jack Layton's day, the NDP in their constitution still said that they were a socialist party based on socialist principles. And then when they had what was the name of the leader after Jack Layton, the one who had the beard?
He became a CTV host, right? News host.
I don't know what he became now,
Yeah,
but
he became a political commentator. I forgot his name.
Yeah, so he had the beard, and what happened was he changed the party platform to take out what do you call it? He changed the party platform to take out the statement that they are a socialist party. At least that's my understanding.
Oh,
Um,
so they're trying to warm up to more right-leaning
no,
sentiment.
they're just trying to pretend to be not as left wing as
Okay.
they want to be. Oh, Thomas
Okay.
Mulcair,
Yeah.
that was his
Yeah.
name.
He became a political commentator for
I'm
CTV.
getting the face in my
Exactly.
mind. I forgot the name. Yeah, Tom
Yeah.
Mulcair. He changed the constitution, and then Jagmeet Singh came in. I wouldn't say that they're night and day. I would say they just have different styles, but they still are a
But
socialist-minded
the
party.
principle is the same. The
Yeah,
principle from
yeah.
okay. So carbon tax. I emailed Mister. I have to read this for our radio listener. Carbon tax. I emailed Mister Wilkinson multiple times asking, how are you monitoring and evaluating effectiveness of the carbon tax, and has it made an appreciable difference in lowering carbon emissions? How will it reduce global temperatures, and by how much? Just quickly, what I want to say to this, I think that the carbon tax is just a license to emit. If you have the money, then you can emit. I think that's what the carbon tax is for. What do you think?
No, the carbon tax. What you're talking about is cap and trade. Okay,
Okay.
so
Is
that's a
it different?
different.
Is that different? Okay, I didn't know. I thought it was the same. Okay,
Yeah,
go ahead.
I agree. The carbon tax is not a good. The way Trudeau has it structured, and I already explained it, is that the money goes into the general coffers. And the person that they're talking about, David Carlson, is he's talking about the current Minister of the Environment, which is Jonathan Wilkinson, who's a liberal. So yeah, he's not going to respond back to you because it's not even his say. All the decisions that are made with the liberals are made through the PMO right now. So you're not going to get an answer from the Minister of the Environment, Jonathan Wilkinson. That's just guaranteed. And the problem with the current carbon tax that Trudeau has, which is escalating at a rapid rate, if you just check your gasoline when you buy gas, or just check your home heating bills, you see the federal carbon tax that keeps escalating. So that just goes into general revenue, and then if they want to give that money from general revenue into from the general coffers into give $1 billion over to the We Charity, they do it at their whim until they get caught red-handed with it. Whereas the conservative one, it goes into a savings account that you can account for, and that you can utilize those funds, take those funds out if you need to buy new energy saving things. Say, for example, you buy a new furnace, or you buy a bicycle maybe, or whatever the case may be. I don't think it's the best necessary policy. However, we needed to have a proper environmental plan that is attractive to centrist-minded people in Ontario and Quebec in order to win seats in Ontario and Quebec.
And these are all assuming that the carbon is actually
Yeah, and I agree with David. I agree with David Carlson right here. In his opinion, he says the carbon tax is a behavioral modification experiment. It absolutely is. I don't necessarily believe in the strategy behind a carbon tax.
and yeah,
And I've always said it. I said it doesn't make my policy if I'm prime minister or leader of a party. If I'm prime minister of Canada, here's my policy, and I've said it before and I'll say it again. Canada emits 1.6%, less under 2%
very low.
of global carbon emissions. Even if we go to negative, it's not going to make a difference on the world. When you have China emitting 1/3 of global emissions, China, India, United States, whatever the case may be, look at China. Unless you change China's trajectory, which the globalists don't want you to change because they're in love with communist China and they're using that as a blueprint for the rest of the world. Until you change China's carbon emissions, you're not going to change anything at all. So as prime minister, as leader of party, what I would recommend is not having a carbon tax whatsoever. I don't believe in behavioral modifications from a governmental level. I believe it's completely wrong. What I would be doing then is investing our tax dollars.
And I was just saying that all of these is assuming that the science, and we know that the scientific community is always even for this issue is
Yeah,
split, and the
that's
scientific
another
community is
that's
always
that's
politicized.
another thing altogether. But what I would do in order to attract the most number of voters and in order to help the economy of Canada is to allot a certain amount of our tax dollars to fund research and development in order to lower greenhouse gas emissions around the world, and then sell that technology to countries like China and India and
And
other
more
high
money.
polluters. Okay, so why are you doing that? First of all, we have the invention, we have the brains here in Canada that we can utilize to come up with these great strategies.
Instead, we're using it for nanolipid particle development.
We can then monetize it by selling it to high carbon
That's
emitting
right.
nations and
Mhm.
reduce their emissions. We make money, we bring money and create industries here in Canada. We create jobs, okay? And we create revenue for Canada. By doing a carbon tax, we're not creating anything. I don't think it makes any sense whatsoever. So that's my strategy, is to use the research and development that we have in Canada to create industry, to create jobs, to create revenue for Canada, and then sell it to the emitting countries, which is to their benefit and then to our economic benefit. That's
If
what I would do. But that's a
we
different story. I'm not a leader of a party yet.
even if we just focus on the brain power that we have in Canada, the technology and the kind of mechanism we have in developing new technology in research, man, this country could be even bigger, richer than the United States. Except instead, what we're doing is we're playing, a political correctness with, the UN, and we have a drama teacher for a leader. That's why we're
Well,
into.
exactly. That's the problem. Anyway, we'll
Anyway,
go to
so
the next
let's
question.
let's go to now. Now we're going to real the nitty gritty. Daniel
So
Bouchard.
this is Daniel, and Daniel
Let me
has
just
made a number of
yeah,
comments.
okay, let me read it for our radio listeners.
Go ahead.
Daniel Bouchard saying PPC is the only option at the moment, and votes splitting is a myth. Conservative and O2 cannot be trusted, and he has more comments down below. But
Okay,
the
so let me
floor
just
is
address it really quickly. I've addressed it already before about how the numbers have worked in the last election in 2019, whatever. So vote splitting is not a myth. Vote splitting is very real. Unfortunately, the PPC supporters are using the emotional side of their brain and not looking at the logical side and not actually looking at the statistics from the previous election. I mean, if PPC was so great and Maxi was so great, at least Max would win one seat. Even the Green Party won 3 seats in the last election. How come Max, with all of his candidates around the country, none of his candidates got more than a few hundred votes? So there's more comments from Daniel. We can go on to more comments, and
You
I'll address them as we
are
come.
basing the poll results on MSM numbers. I vehemently disagree. The only thing that should be considered in this election is freedom. I'm tired of conservative rhetoric. That's Daniel Bouchard again.
So he's right, in the sense that freedom is the most important thing. But what are you voting for? Are you voting for freedom because you don't like the Conservative Party, and in which case your vote is going to give a help to the Trudeau Liberals? Or are you voting for freedom because you don't like Trudeau and you want to get rid of him, so you look for the most logical way to get rid of Trudeau? The fact of the matter is, I'm not basing it on mainstream media results. I'm basing it just even on the results of the 2019 election and the by-election that Maxime tried to run for but didn't succeed, came in 4th place or something, just last year alone. He isn't able to get enough votes to support him. So by doing that, you split the votes and you help the Liberals win. And in the riding that Maxime ran in, the Liberal won in the by-election last time.
I just want to say that Daniel Bouchard is one of our very loyal viewers and listeners, and in many other issues.
I'm glad that he is, but you can see by his comments, he's getting increasingly more agitated and increasingly more emotional. He's letting his emotions take control of his thought process rather than logic. When you all caps and you talk about vehemently disagree, you're showing me that you're solely thinking from the logical side, from the emotional side of your brain, not the logical side.
Go
ahead, Joe.
I just want to say that you and Daniel agreed in other episodes in some of the issues that you have some agreements with, except for when it comes
Absolutely,
to
because
yeah,
you, me, and him all agree about the freedom aspect, about the vaccines aspect, about the COVID pandemic aspect, about the falsehoods about it, about the PCR test. We all agree on that. Now, the question is how to get rid of the biggest globalist cabal puppet, which is Justin Trudeau. I'm not saying that the other ones aren't. I'm just saying is let's knock off the kingpin first, and then we'll work on knocking off the other ones one by one.
well, Daniel has more, but let's just touch one more, and then let's give others a turn here.
Sure.
Daniel, for our radio listeners, Daniel Bouchard again. One more from the comment section. Canada has flip-flopped between conservatives, liberals, and liberals for decades. This has led us to where we are now. Be gone, liberals, conservatives, NDP, and Green, all globalist parties. Time for a change. What is the definition of insanity? Continuing to do the same thing and expecting a different result.
Okay,
Conservatives
you can
are
see
gone in Alberta.
the radio listeners cannot see the angry face emoji at the end, but this is exactly what I'm talking about. You can see the intense passion and emotion that's coming out of this message. That just shows you this is Daniel. With all due respect, you are thinking from the emotional side of your brain, and this is becoming the issue with PPC people. Their judgment is clouded, and they're only looking at the emotional side of arguments. The point here is we all have a common goal, which is to get rid of Trudeau and to bring back our liberties and freedoms back. I'm not saying that there's any one party that can particularly do that 100%. Not everything in the conservative platform am I in agreement with. But what I realize is the conservative platform can be the tool that we can get rid of Trudeau, and then we as conservative members can deal with O'Toole and can deal with these things in the platform that we don't agree with. Or we can empower conservative MPs that get elected to talk in caucus against some of the platform aspects and to vote against certain things. And if they don't like it and half of the conservatives vote against it, Aaron O'Toole can kick those half out just as they did with Derek Sloan, and they can start their own party.
My touchscreen just stopped working, but just quickly, I want to comment that.
Okay, there is one more comment I do want you to highlight from Daniel Bouchard, which is at 7:39. He says that I am delusional. He says, you are delusional in all caps. And this is where his emotions have hit an apex.
Well, it starts with that you are due.
You are due, right? He can't even type it. And then he says, you are delusional. So this is what I'm trying to say. Guys, don't think with your emotions. Think logically. Think of this as a military campaign. A general who wants to conquer the opponent does not think with emotions. He doesn't say, I hate the opponent. He focuses on how can I conquer that opponent? And our mutual opponent is Justin Trudeau.
I just want to kind of weigh in a little bit. Everybody, and I believe that Richard agrees with me, that everybody has the right, rightfully so, should be angry right now. And we can see Daniel is angry, but we have to know who's the enemy. The enemy is Trudeau. The enemy are the globalists.
The enemy is the globalist cabal. And I'm sorry when I do this. This is not a
You're not doing it. Right?
I do it naturally. This is Donald Trump does it too. I do it naturally. And it bothers me when now what I know what it means in occult, I'm not doing that. Okay. So I don't know how to move my hand in a different way. I'm just going to do it like this. This is our enemy are the globalists. Our enemy are the occult. Our enemy are that cabal that is trying to take over and change our entire way of life. That is our enemy, our united enemy. And we have to stand united together because believe me, What they want is to divide us. And this is what they're doing. They're dividing us with you're vaccinated, you're unvaccinated. You're for the passport, you're against the passport. You're this, you're that. You get service, they're creating a two-tiered system. They are dividing us, even within our own families. This is what they want to do. We have to stand united and get rid of the globalist cabal once and for all. And I'm telling you, we have to cut the head off that snake. We can't just let them slither under the ground again. We have to totally eviscerate them so that they can never do this to humanity ever again.
And don't give your 100% confidence to any one person.
100%. I agree with you.
Like I told you guys, I used to give all of my support to Rodrigo Duterte, and I love Jason Kenney, and I was a big fan of Andrew Scheer and the guy before him. Sorry,
Stephen Harper.
Stephen Harper, right? So, but we cannot give 100%. Even Donald Trump, I would always. I'm very supportive of Donald Trump. I like Maxime Bernier, but don't give your 100% devotion to one person. Even in the movement, I don't give my 100% devotion to Chris Guy, and a lot of people do follow him blindly. But we have to admire all of these people who are speaking up. But don't give your faith and admiration and devotion to one single person. We have to come together as ordinary Janes and Joes, lifting each other up. And sometimes that's our tendency, is to push one person up to rule over us. And sometimes that's the reason they rule over us, is because we put them there.
I agree with you, Joe. I agree with you.
So, Daniel, we love you, brother. And you and Richard has agreed on so many other issues in the past here on this show. And so, but the thing that I really like about Richard is he is emotional about these things, but he's also level-headed when it comes to numbers and strategy. You need a steady hand. You need a steady hand to win a fight as big as what we are faced against. We cannot just fall for emotion. So let's go, kind of change the temperature a little bit, and let's go to David Carlson, one more friendly comment here. Trudeau, well, if you can call it friendly, I'll read it for our radio listeners. Trudeau is close with George Soros. He and Chrystia Freeland met with him prior to the 2015 election. I have a photo of their meeting. Someone needs to investigate their nefarious relationship. I'd rather vote for Forrest Gump.
I agree with you, David. I have that same photo. We've all seen that same photo where they sit together. And let's face it, that's not the only time they've sat together. They're always together every year, other than the past year when they couldn't travel to Davos. But every year at the World Economic Forum, there is George Soros. He's there preaching to the choir over there of globalists. And that's just a fact. And Trudeau is one of his students, just as Chrystia Freeland is, just as a number of different people are, whether it's Joe Biden, AOC, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, like all of them are students of George Soros. So this is a big concern. There's no question that should be looked into, and with a very bright light.
Same person, David Carlson, he was saying, I don't like O'Toole, pro-choice platform. I'm not sure if he supports vax passports. I think you addressed this already.
Yeah, so I addressed it. Go to conservative.ca and look at the recovery plan for Canada. If you go and download the full plan, the entire platform, and you look under the heading which says about vaccines and the pandemic, you see that it's very clear. It clearly states that the Conservative Party does not believe in mandatory vaccinations. He is talking about some form of if there's a need for a national passport for people to travel outside of the country, but he's not talking about mandatory vaccinations, which to me is a big concern. I agree with you. I'm not necessarily in favor of O'Toole's pro-choice platform, but that's his point of view. And he's a Durham guy. He's an Ontario guy. And maybe that's what he believes in his heart. And maybe that's the case, that they believe that that's the case in order to be successful in Ontario and Quebec. I don't think many pro-lifers can be successful in Quebec. Quebec is very much a pro-choice province.
And that's one of the reason I can't. It's very hard for me to believe that O'Toole is a globalist, because we know that he's an ordinary Joe. He's an ordinary guy from Durham who was a military person, and yeah, it's very difficult for me to connect that. Fred Avery, we haven't seen him for a while. Welcome back, Fred. Interesting that Bernie's platform was ousted by the other. And I see we're 8:24, or in 8:30 we have to have a hard stop. Richard,
Good.
thank you for the
Thank you.
time that you have spent with us. But I didn't realize the time went by so
Okay,
fast.
I don't understand the question, Fred, that Bernie's platform was ousted by other contenders. I don't think that his platform wasn't ousted. I don't really know what Bernie's platform is. He hasn't put forward an official platform like the other parties have. He's made many statements, which I support, regarding vaccines, that regarding passports. I like his stance on those things, but I don't know his platform. Now, if you're talking about him not being on the debate stage, well, look, he wasn't. He was on the debate stage in 2019. At first, he wasn't. Then they said, "Okay, let's put him on," and they put him on. So he had a stage. He was there, able to debate Andrew Scheer, Jagmeet Singh, Justin Trudeau at the debate, and the leader of the Bloc Québécois in the English and French language debates. All right, he was there in last elections debate stage, and he still couldn't win a single seat for the PPC. He couldn't win more than a few hundred votes for any of his candidates. So what's the point?
A very friendly comment, finally, on the comment section. Fabian Catri, thank you, Richard. I'm learning a lot about Maxime and O'Toole. I need to go read more about the conservative policies. And Fred Avery was saying, I think more important issue at hand is vax passport and freedoms, not same-sex issues. Even though they are important, yeah, these are important issues. But right
Yeah,
now,
right now, vax passports and your freedoms. Listen, mandatory vaccinations, for your freedom, lockdowns, all these things are very, very, very crucial. No question about it.
and Canada in general, and Alberta in particular, is a leader in carbon capture technology. Oh yeah,
Well,
if
that's why I was saying we only emit 1.6. It's less than 2% of global greenhouse emissions at the most, at the highest number. So what the heck are we doing when the biggest polluter is China and we're letting them pollute because the globalists are allowing it? It
and
doesn't make
after
sense.
and after eating a lot of steak, you want to kind of wash down, the flavor with a good red wine. And I think we are going to close with this, because this is sort of like a sucker punch. Nothing to do with our conversation, but Joe Biden is destroying America.
And no question, he's destroying America and he's destroying Afghanistan at the same time. And the fact of the matter is, a poll just came out that I saw, a very good poll, that said that in a head-to-head match today, Donald Trump would beat Joe Biden in a heartbeat. And I know a lot of Democrats, not a lot, but I know some Democrats who openly say that this is not what they voted for. They voted for Biden because they didn't like Trump, because the media brainwashed them that way. But they didn't vote for all this left-wing radical nonsense, and they regret their vote for Joe Biden. I know a lot of people who voted for Joe Biden who are saying that they regret their vote nowadays, and they wish they had voted for Trump.
Richard, I've been doing a lot of research. I couldn't do a consistent radio show because of all the shadow banning. And I've been sort of like fixing the Rumble and making sure that we are going to increase people. We need you to help us increase our subscription on Rumble, because that will be our main place, our main channel, and also Zeno FM, our radio app, our main channels to broadcast our message, because they're just going to shadow ban us on Facebook forever. But we're going to close with this. I've been doing a lot of research. Apparently, the Americans gave Afghanistan gears and equipments and arms and bullets and all that three times in the recent history, right? First was when they're trying to get rid of the Soviets
Right.
in the late 60s or early 70s. Second, during Obama's years, when they
Okay, so
pulled
you're
out.
talking, it was late 70s. It was during Jimmy Carter, late 70s, and Ronald Reagan,
That's
early
right.
80s.
They
Yeah.
gave them a lot of weapons, and same weapons that was given to the Afghans were used against the Americans. So they were firing same weapons the American gave them.
Yeah.
against the Americans. And then the next time is during Obama years when they first pulled out. Taliban got a lot of weapons, and then now finally again. So we're coming close to the 20th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. Nothing to celebrate, but of course we need to commemorate how that has changed history. Apparently, there's a lot of uh, what's the word? Sort of like a parallelism with what's going on now and with what's 9/11. Just follow on the radio show. I'm going to discuss that in the next few days. But with that, let's leave a
Hold on,
cliffhanger.
before you leave, there's one more comment from David Carlson.
Richard understands the globalist threat very well. They are indeed the enemy.
And
Thank
I
you.
want to thank David Carlson for that comment very, very, very much.
There you go. We need both.
And Fabian's comment earlier too. I wanted to thank him too.
Fabian Catri. Thank you, Fabian Catri. And thank you
Fabian.
also to all who are giving like dissenting opinions as well, because we are a free society and we welcome that. Unlike your MSM, who will control the narrative all the time,
Exactly.
here we welcome all kinds of opinions. And with that, folks, thank you for sticking with us for 2 hours exactly. Right now, it marks our 2 hours, but we didn't. Yeah, we kind of started 6:30 today, right?
Yeah, we started a little late.
I was late. So with that, folks, thank you for joining us. Thank you, Richard, for answering all of the questions.
My pleasure.
And I think I would like to set up another episode where we can have in the studio other points of view. But I know you're gonna be very busy with the. Are you back next week, or next week is really gonna be?
I'm back next week because we're just finishing up the advanced voting. Reminder to everyone: advanced voting starts
The
this
weekend?
Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. at your local advanced voting location. It will show up on your voter's card. Please go ahead and vote early. I recommend you to vote early. Don't wait till election day. You'll avoid the lineups. It's much better that way. That's what I choose to do. And then I should be back for next Wednesday because we'll have a bit of a breather, and then it's a big get out the vote for election day.
Well, I got a reply from one of the senators in Australia, but I want to kind of leave it. I want to leave it to where you're not so exhausted with
After the election.
After the election, we're fresh and energetic and all that. And I keep on forgetting to talk about our Patreon guys. Please come and
Yes.
join our Patreon. Our goal is 1,000 Patreon members for $3. And apparently, I didn't realize that when you look at this from the Canadian side, it actually shows the Canadian is more than $3. I say $3 because that's how I program the Patreon, but apparently that's US dollars, $3 a month, US dollars. So I think that's around $4.50 per month for
Right.
Canadians. But folks, we need about 1,000 people to join us so that we can pay for the basics. And with that, thank you, everybody. In the last days, God will pour out His Spirit on all men. The young men will dream dreams. The old men will see visions, or maybe the other way around. But He will also pour out His Spirit on ordinary Janes and Joes like you and me. It's the day of the ordinary Joe, the time of the ordinary Joe. Let's all rise up. We are here, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in Toronto, 5 p.m. in Manitoba, 4 p.m. in Western Canada, 3 p.m. in British Columbia. Rain or shine. And with that, folks, God bless you all. We'll see you again next week. See you again, Richard, and have fun at the election trail.
Thank you.
Campaign trail. God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye. We'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.
You're the original Ordinary Joe, but I'm an Ordinary Joe too.
My name is John Tory. I'm the mayor of Toronto, and you are watching the Ordinary Joe Show. And this is Ordinary Joe right here. He's right here.